السلام عليكم. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونتوب إليه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد. Inshallah ta'ala, for our reflection today for this prayer service, we thought of exploring the theme of the blessings of starting a new Muslim year, together with the very first special two occasions that begin the year, which are the two sacred days of the 1st of Muharram and the 10th of Muharram, both of which have extraordinary significance in Islamic history. And it will be befitting to give them what they deserve to have, which is an occasion to think, reflect, and learn from these two occasions. I want to provide the context for this introduction that, to me personally, the Islamic calendar into the traditions that are Judeo-Christian and Muslim is the last one to come, though it is the junior of the three. To me personally, it is the one that encompasses and represents better the history of spiritual humanity for two reasons. One, because it had a perspective on the past, which means that coming last, you benefit from the things that have come before you, and you learn certain things that you now not only can report on, but you can also opine on them. Give a perspective by saying, from what I have observed, certain things have worked well, and others require further development. You cannot do that when you are buried in history. The further out you go, the better your perspective becomes from where you came from. So that's the first reason. The second reason, which is equally important, is obviously by virtue of the fact that it came at the time where the world has already passed the period of the axial age, which is the period of formation of the spiritual identity that became monotheism later on. When Muhammad arrived, he arrived to become the brick in the wall, Khatam al-Anbiya wal-Mursaleen. So he's the seal of that experience of prophethood. And obviously, you cannot come at the end of a process and stamp it with the seal of approval if it's not proven. That's what seals of approvals do. They get put on something to say that we have put them through everything and now that they are approved. So what's the significance of these 2 days? To me, there is a link between the two of them that is worth spiking. I'm going to talk about the commonalities. Differences are usually not part of a platform of a khutbah on Friday. The first thing that's important is that the 10th of Muharram historically, and it's not that the Islamic calendar started in pre-Islam, but historically that day is related into the history that Allah has decided for the believers of a very critical event that happened during it. And that is the event in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala delivered the followers of Nuh, who were the believers in the ark, from the danger of drowning at sea to the rescue and delivery of bringing them to firm land. The 1st of Muharram, which is the start of the Islamic calendar, to me, means that it is the day where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has delivered humanity from the ignorance of al-Jahiliyyah to the enlightenment of Islam. So in simple terms, the 1st and the 10th day that mark the start of the Islamic calendar, they have a common link in that we celebrate the deliverance of humanity in its spiritual history from drowning to life and from darkness to enlightenment. That's basically, to me, what the Islamic calendar means. Every time we come upon it and we start with it and we reflect on it. And it is on that deliverance that I'm going to spend the balance of the time for the remaining of the khutbah, inshallah ta'ala, to get the context of it. Some of you sitting in this hall here might ask the question, deliver from what? I want to drive, I get in my car, I go to wherever I want. I fancy something that I need to go get, I go get it. I'm craving a special event and a special dinner to go on something. I make a reservation, I hop in my car and I find somebody waiting for me. Yes, Mr. So-and-so, yes, Mrs. So-and-so, and the table is ready. Deliver from what? What's the issue? And that's where it starts to become interesting. I would argue that as soon as you get from the little things that are the things that I call mundane in life, and we become a little bit more in tune with the reality of mankind and the suffering of mankind, then the Muslim calendar starts to resonate. It starts to have a special message and a special meaning in our ears and in our hearts. I am not going to dramatize the reality of the world, but I happen to have a quote from someone that I tremendously respect, that I think reflects the reality of the modern world in one of the best terms I have seen described. This is a quote from Dr. Wilson. He's a sociobiologist who describes the state of humanity in the world in these 3 sentences. He says, the real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. So I'm going to repeat that slowly because it's the linchpin, it's the anchor point of the entire khutbah. So I'm going to repeat it because it takes quite a bit to absorb what he said. So he said, we live in a world today where the problem of humanity can be described into these 3 things. Paleolithic emotions, what does that mean? That one has groups of people, when humanity makes decisions, we still do not make decisions with intelligent emotions. We make decisions on the binary that our biology has built in us in 300 million years. Flight or fight. So to overcome that emotion will take something very special to come out of this. And that's why his statement is incredibly insightful to lay at our feet, if you wish, bare the condition of our humanity. The second statement he makes is equally profound. He says we have medieval institutions. I have always a joke that I share sort of in private circles where I always say that the Europeans have gifted to the rest of the world one thing. That is a combination of both French and Anglo-Saxon, British primarily. Something that is called European administration. They put the whole world on it by giving us version 1.0, and then they left us on version 1.0 and then disappeared to go further upgrades. So the whole world is operating on version 1.0 of administration. So whenever something new comes and we have to deal with it, we are all frazzled. How do we bring this in light with this, that, and the other? And so we start laws, frantically writing them at every corner to try to catch up with the reality. And I think that's equally unbelievably insightful. And the third and the last one, which I think is his punchline into his assessment of the troubles with humanity, is this thing that is called godlike technology, where today some kid with pimples in his face can literally get behind his screen, code something, build a worm or a virus, send it around the world, and can crush utility provisioning for people for their homes, and bring aircrafts from the sky, and whatever. Because the potency of the technology is quite extraordinary if we don't pay attention to it. And I think that that's important to realize why the Islamic calendar comes year after year to remind us that we need to be delivered from this horror to something that is a lot more appealing and a lot more useful. And I think that one of the most extraordinary gifts of Islam in the spiritual development of what we do with it in our lives is the clarity of purpose, a plan to execute to achieve that clarity of purpose. And I think actually the third point is the most extraordinary of all of the three gifts. And the voice of the Prophet ﷺ that describes that purpose and that plan in the simplest manner possible so everybody can be included in it. So I don't need an interpreter. I don't need a clergy that walks me through the parsing of the complexity of what I need to go through. I can build a personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I can engage in a journey that inshallah will save me and will save us. عن جابر بن حبان قال كنا عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And this is actually some extremely important point that I want to raise. There is this definition of the heritage of the Prophet ﷺ that is explained as a sunnah. And in this sunnah, there is the compilation of the entire lifestyle of the Prophet ﷺ in forms of sunnah qawliya wa sunnah fi'liya. So there are things that he said and things that he did, and things that he neither said nor did, but consented to them through silence, and many other things that we won't get into because that's not the topic. But there's one of them that I feel is quite extraordinary. The Prophet ﷺ also communicated visually. And unfortunately, this is a point that we do not emphasize enough. So I'm going to repeat that statement because it's an important one as well. The Prophet ﷺ also communicated visually because he did not have the privilege and the access to writing as a language because he was illiterate and he couldn't write. That doesn't mean that he could not draw. And the Prophet ﷺ did. And this hadith is exactly one of them. And so Jabir is saying that we were sitting with him. كُنَّا عِنْدَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم. So he's an eyewitness. He was sitting with him. And the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, in engaging in conversation, did the following thing with them. So now Jabir is describing. فَخَطَّ خَطًّا. He drew a line with his finger. That's what the Prophet ﷺ did. So he didn't act, he didn't say, he didn't teach, he didn't do anything. So to make his point, he drew a line with his finger. ثم خط خطين عن يمينه وخطين عن يساره. So then he took two fingers and he drew with them two lines to the right of the central line and two lines to the left of the central line. So that's sort of a graphic organizer for life. That's what the Prophet ﷺ was trying to do, is to develop a mental model graphically on how you should perceive life and the endorsement of Islam as the lifestyle and the value that you choose in your life. ثم وضع صلى الله عليه وسلم يده على الخط الأوسط. Then he took his hand and he put it on the line that he drew in the center, the vertical line that he drew in the center. وقال, and then he said, that's the first time that he actually described the caption of the schema that he was drawing in front of people so they understand what the graphic means. وقال, هذا سبيل الله. This is the path to Allah, that straight path. Then he overlaid a Quranic reading, if you wish, to comment on the graphic drawing that he just did. Meaning that this graphic drawing is an explanation in drawing form of this verse that I am going to read with you. ثم قرأ من سورة الأنعام فقال بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وأن هذا صراطي, this is my path, مستقيمة, straight, فاتبعوه, follow it, ولا تتبعوا السبل, and do not go on these tributaries, the two lines and the two lines on the right and on the left. فتفرق بكم, those lines will lead you astray, عن سبيل الله, away from the path of Allah. ذلكم وصاكم به, that is what Allah has admonished you to do and has reminded you of. لعلكم تتقون, so you might find the path to piety. So that's how the Prophet ﷺ introduced what it means to follow, to remember, to bring about, to reflect on this thing that we call Islam on the anniversary of its birth. This form of spiritual maturity that the Prophet ﷺ has drawn and bestowed to us. And I love the idea, right? So you think about how long it took us. Many of you are young, perhaps you don't remember that. The days where we needed to find your destination and you had to really have a pilot and a co-pilot. One of us would play the driver and the other one is having this atlas map and they are turning page after page and they are saying, yep, we just crossed exit 72 and we got another 25 miles to go. And so suddenly all of this gets digitized and now it's in front of us graphically, and to keep our hands on the wheel, you can even have it voice prompt. It's actually telling you, turn at the next thing, slow down, you are coming to heavy traffic, and you get all of this now, and we take that for granted. And the Prophet ﷺ took that Quran, at least somebody finds it hard to work through it. Here is the line, stay the course, here are the other choices, don't you go there. Simple. Simple. It doesn't matter whether you are 7 years old, 13 years old, 45 years old, a scholar of erudition in Islam that you have accumulated all of the Islamic knowledges, or you don't know a single word about what this religion is. We all get it. That's pretty clear. Very clear. We can't get confused about that with multiple interpretations. So that's the first point. So then the Prophet ﷺ says, which is a hadith that comes to us, and Shaddad ibn Aus, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And this is fascinating, to me it has always been a fascinating hadith, in which the Prophet ﷺ makes the following prayer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahumma inni as'aluka thabata fil amr. You might, if you stay with me, so we get the map. And so the map has this line. Some scholars have said that what he meant is that the starting point of that straight line is here and now, and the end point is to be reunited in Jannah with the place that we are aiming for. So the line is both physical and metaphysical in the description of what it realizes. And yet, the Prophet ﷺ prays with this prayer for himself. He prays this prayer for himself. Allahumma inni askaluka, oh Allah, I pray to you, الثبات في الأمر, that you make me stay the course on this particular line. What does this suggest? That the balancing act of staying on that line and not going to the two that are on the right and the left is demanding. There will always be a tendency to veer off course. It's going to go off course. That's the only guarantee in life. And the idea is to make that course correction and to bring it back. And what the Prophet ﷺ teaches through the hadith is that the steering wheel that brings you back into the lane, when the lane departure signal and the wheel starts to vibrate that says you're off lane, come back, is the power of this prayer to go back to Allah and to pray to Him to put us back on the lane so we can arrive to destination. And subhanallah, that the Prophet ﷺ, when he gave that particular advice, and that's why I say that it's a combination of these two hadiths that I find fascinating. It's amazing that he made this dua during our lifetime, and he bookended our lives when we exit this world with a similar dua exactly in the same way, in which he says, and this hadith comes to us by Abi Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لقنوا موتاكم لا إله إلا الله. When you bring the person who passed away to the very final resting place, and you are taking them in order to roll them into the very final home that will become their home for eternity. So as soon as you put them there, the first thing that you do, which is called talqin, the first thing that you do in talqin is to read La ilaha illallah on them. وَقُولُوا, and say at that time of birth when you put in them. These are basically, listen very, very carefully, if you can call it that. These are the very last famous words that we hear when we exit this world. Very last ones we hear. The Imam that comes down with you says La ilaha illallah, and then the Prophet ﷺ says, and say to them the final thing as they go. الثبات الثبات, stay the course, stay the course. It says, come back to the straight line. We know that life has ended, but even at this moment of the end of life, stay on the line. Now, stay on the line. We're going to put you back on the line. وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. And there is no power except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the wisdom of the teaching of our Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in the battle of this life, of the things that we see in every day, I have a piece of advice that I call the New Year's resolution of the Islamic calendar for this particular year. I suggest that we reflect, hopefully 5 minutes remaining, I can cover 5 of them, but if I not, then I'm sorry and I apologize for that, we'll cover as much as we can. I suggest that as we want to mark this year that we have just entered now, and we leave on it an impression and a presence and an impact that can remember us for the place where we deserve to be remembered, that we might consider one of these 5 resolutions. Number 1, الاعتصام بحبل الله. Hold on, and they are all Quranic. Hold on to the rope of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Ali Imran, which is verse 103, says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا. You know the dictate that we have in the English language that we use over and over again from our kids, our ages and odd times, it applies here. United we stand, divided we fall. There is only one recipe for failure in community work, and that is division. When people are united, the impossible becomes possible. I saw a few days ago a clip that I think sums it all in a more profound way, at least to me personally. So there are these subhuman beings. I think even the word clowns is something that they don't deserve to describe them. Subhuman beings in Denmark who are trying to irritate the Muslim emotions around the world with these Quran burning ceremonies. So one of them grabbed the recording, which I thought was unbelievably telling. There is a staging in this. It's theatrical. So these guys go ahead of time. They set up the Quran on something that looks like an easel, and they have all of these police come in there to protect the act of freedom of choosing and executing anything you want in Denmark, because you are entitled to that as a Danish citizen. As this Quran is waiting to be burned, there is this young woman that jumps out of nowhere, putting her body at harm's way, hugs the Quran, yanks it from the easel, and starts to run. And these Danish police guys, I guess they choose them by size or something, I don't exactly know what it is, they were quite impressively tall, tackle her to the ground, and they are ripping her apart with the sole purpose of grabbing that Quran again from her hand and go put it back in the easel. The moral of the story is that they won, because she was alone. United we stand, divided we fall. So if you want to do some soul searching this year, think of restoring our unity in our community and in our ummah. Piece of advice number 2. We can never know where we are going if we didn't state and articulate the vision of what that ideal destination looks like. I always say that one of the disastrous recipes of walking in history is to walk to the future with your eyes looking at the past. In personal life, in family life, in community life, in corporate life, in everything else. The people who get hurt the most are the ones that are constantly pontificating about what happened yesterday and why it went wrong. And the people that are always successful who say, okay, that was just a bad day. Where do we go from here? And then it becomes better. And that's what true leadership is always about. And that's exactly what happened with the Prophet ﷺ. He comes out from Taif and he's sitting on this rock and his head is bleeding and his sandals are full of blood and he's exhausted and he has been pelleted with rocks and all over the place. And he's thinking about, what's that? I love Seth Godin, the guru of marketing. He has one of these lectures which is extraordinary. He says there is only one place you should never quit in whatever you do in the project in life. Because life is going to have always this roller coaster. It's going to take you up, then it's going to take you down, and it's going to take you up again. The one place where you should never quit is when you are at the bottom. Because you're learning. That's the place you should never quit. But once you pass that, and you are on your way up, and you conquered whatever that you are conquering, and you fancy saying, I did it now, I don't care anymore, then quit. And so the Prophet ﷺ literally stoned by his people. He's at the bottom. And what does he do? He doesn't quit. I'm going to find the crew that will accept this. And he goes to Medina. Because he had a vision. And subhanAllah, his vision was inclusive of those who harmed him. When Jibreel came to him and he said, command, and I will reduce them to ashes, just say something. And he said, least from them, there will come believers that will follow this religion. So we need a vision. Make one for yourself. Number 3. drop the weights and the guilt. One of the things that I noticed with the Muslim community as of late, not as of late, as of many years I've been accumulating this in observation, which is a little bit devastating, and it's not one of the things that is commendable in our particular religion. We have developed a guilt complex, so we are guilty all the time. And there is a machinery that works to make us guilty of everything and answer to everything, etc. So this has come now to what I call pandemic proportions. I remember very well that there is the Germans, they are like no one else. So everybody in Europe had fairy tales, and obviously they came from other places, and then the Italians wrote the first versions because of Latin, and then others translated them. And most of the fairy tales that your Disney thing looks at all the time, they come from this French book that was written by a French author in about 1692 or so, including all of the versions that you are familiar with. One of the things that I always found fascinating is that when the Germans took the story of Cinderella, they did it differently. They didn't do it in the way that you are familiar with it. There is a prince, and there is a no-known girl. So these two characters constructed, they are in the story. But in the German story of Cinderella, the prince is somebody who came from battle. And when he came from battle, one of his robes that he used to wear in battle got stained with the blood of a victim that he killed in the battlefield. And he couldn't wash it away. Whatever he did and whoever servants he sent it to, that stain, that blood stain, could never come out from his clothes. So one day he had the bright idea. He crowdsourced the problem. They said, who can solve this? So that robe went into some place, and this Cinderella in the German, I meant to say Scottish version. I meant to say Scottish, I said German. The Scottish version. In the Scottish version, this Cinderella went in and she mixes this concoction, whatever it was, and she washes this robe of this king, and then the blood goes away. And then the rest of the story becomes a fairy tale. He knows who she is, and he brings her in, and he marries her, and the rest of it goes in with all laughter and our merry ways. You know what's interesting about this particular story for me? As long as he was living with that guilt of the blood stain that would remind him of what he did on a battlefield, he could never find peace. He had to find a companion, somebody that comes in, that would not only wash the blood from his robe, but then gift him the gift of love. That's what that story means. I promise you that Islam will offer you this every day. If you commit to it, if you drop the guilt, you drop the weight, and you move on. Because my time is done, I will conclude the very last one, so I'll drop one and I'll just do 4. The last one is us, US Muslims. We are different from Singaporean Muslims. We are different from Argentinian Muslims. And we are certainly different from Muslims from Madagascar. There are a lot of things that unite us, and we have a common thread that runs through all of us. But we have things that are different for our way. So one of the things I'd like to start seeing is to let that come out in some way. So I have an idea for you that I would wish we could explore a little further. In the Declaration of Independence of the United States, there is a phrase that has vexed a lot of scholars. And it's the phrase that says, the pursuit of happiness. And it's interesting that the founding fathers made this particular claim as one of 3 inalienable rights. The pursuit of happiness is something that God gifted you with. That's what they wrote. And what I always found fascinating, and that's what I think you have very special going for you as US Muslims, is because there is this verse tucked into the Quran in Surah Yunus, which is verse 58. I'm just going to quote it for what it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ Say with the gratitude of Allah. وَبِرَحْمَتِهِ, and with His mercy. فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا. For that, you believers, you are commanded to express happiness. You believers, you are commanded to express happiness. هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. And it is much better than anything else that you collect. What I find absolutely amazing is that if you look at the course of history, that all made us born here, landed here, arrived here, in transition through here, for whatever reasons, life came and said, I'm going to put you in a place where the Quran has institutionalized the exercise of happiness, and the Declaration of Independence has gifted you an inalienable right to go and pursue it. Why should the Muslim be depressed? You should never be. You should never be. That's a gift that I cannot give to Canadian Muslims. That's a gift that I cannot give to South African Muslims, however devout they are. That's what it means to recognize the signs of Allah and to be part of what Allah has given us. May you have a very, very happy new Islamic year, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from you, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه فإنه المستغفرين. الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever ailment or hardship or difficulty you are going through, that Allah will lift it from you. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, that whatever your dreams and wishes are for this year, that He grants them to you. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever torment might be coming your way or that you are already in the middle of, that Allah will find a way and a path for you out of it. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you health. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you peace of mind. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you obedient children. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide you guided children. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring our community together and strengthen it. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala above all, at Tabath, to stay the course of His religion. آمين آمين آمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. وأقم الصلاة إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حيا للصلاة حيا للفلاح، قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله.
لا إله إلا الله دائما أبدا. If you don't mind, those of you who are at the back, please move to your right and complete the rows on your right. Just move to your right and go all the way. There's still plenty of room. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for doing that. Keep going to your right, please. استووا واعتدلوا. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.